The story takes place in August of 2013 in the mountains of southern Oregon. I am a United States Air Force Security Forces airman. My girlfriend was at work, and as a swelteringly hot day began to turn into thunderstorms, my buddy Nick and I decided to go explore some back roads and get out of the heat in town. Southern Oregon is crisscrossed with logging roads, some actively used, many totally forgotten and grown over. Nick and I spent many of our days starting on roads that we knew, finding roads we didn't know, driving for hours into the mountains, and eventually navigating back to paved roads. On this particular day, with storm clouds building over the mountains, we set off on a road we had never been on and began the drive into the mountains. After driving for around an hour, we hadn't seen nor heard any signs of other people in the woods. We rounded a bend in the thick fir woods and emerged in a meadow that was totally surrounded by thick aspen groves. The meadow was perfectly flat and eerily still. We both noticed the strange stillness almost immediately. No birds, hardly any insect noise, no squirrels, and certainly no other people. On the far side of the meadow, right at the edge of the tree line, there was a picnic table. This table was very odd, however. It was painted a bright orange and was much larger than a typical picnic table in a park. Remarking on this, Nick drove through the meadow to get a closer look. I remember being apprehensive as we approached. The whole scenario was exceptionally strange. The overall silence of the aspen grove was unsettling. Also, it was nearly impossible to see far into the trees as aspens grow extremely close together. When we parked by the table, I hopped out of the passenger seat of the truck to check it out. I'm not very tall, only about 5'5". Regardless, the table was ridiculously oversized and practically unusable. The seats were nearly at chest level, meaning I would have to climb up to even sit on them. As I was observing the table, Nick called me over to the truck, and I noticed he was looking back into the aspens. At first, I couldn't see what he was looking at, but then I noticed a splash of color that was completely out of place in the thick trees. A small one-man tent was set back in the woods, about 50 feet from the strange table. I had an initial feeling of dread, and felt certain that there was someone in the tent, and if we could see the tent, they could see us. There were no campgrounds in the area, no people, no main roads for miles. Surely someone camping so remotely would be, at the very least, a strange person. However, as we observed the tent, we didn't see any movement or hear any sounds coming from it. Nick suggested I call out. I didn't want to, but I did. "Hey, anyone in there?" I yelled. No reply. Feeling completely on edge, Nick and I thought about driving away and leaving this strange area. But we began to fear the worst. What if there was a body in the tent? What if somebody had gotten kidnapped? Foolish, I know, but we thought it all the same. After some debate, we decided to have Nick turn the truck around to drive away from the camp. Should we need to leave in a hurry, he would be waiting behind the wheel. With my heart pounding, I started walking through the trees toward the tent. I was totally keyed up with my senses on full alert. When I reached the campsite, several things struck me as odd. Backpacks were scattered all over. No fire had been built, no wood collected. The tent was literally full of backpacks and women's clothing. Full of dread, I turned to leave and tell Nick what I had seen. As I left, I heard Nick start yelling. "Let's go, let's get the fuck out of here." Not knowing why he was yelling, I ran back to the truck. When I broke out of the trees, I saw a beat-up old Ford Taurus on the road, blocking us from leaving the meadow. I immediately leapt into the passenger seat and Nick floored the gas pedal. The car was occupied by two men. A third person was lying against the window in the back. As we drove across the meadow, the driver attempted to block us from the road, but Nick drove around them and accelerated the way we had come from. I looked back and saw the car attempting to turn around on the narrow road. Nick drove like a madman, and though I was honestly terrified that they would catch up, we hit the highway without seeing the car again. I still do not know if the person in back was male or female. I called the state police, and they promised to send a trooper out to check out the scene. However, I received a call the next day from a trooper saying that the campsite, the backpacks, and the woman's clothing was all gone, though he could tell people had been in the area. The strange table is still by the thick aspen grove. I have not returned to the area and do not intend to. To preface this, I want to say last year I spent about 32 days in the woods either scouting, hunting, or fishing. The year before that I spent about 22 days, not including my regular hunts and camping adventures. which in the past 3 years adds up to just over 100 days. I've been hunting since I was 9 and have spent a lot of time outdoors in various different parts of the US and in Canada. I've seen and heard a lot of strange shit, but this takes the cake. I was in CO.AG, which is North Georgia wilderness, for 7 days scouting for bears, wild hogs, and deer, prepping for a hunting trip later that year. I had hiked in about 10 miles and then went off trail for another 3 to 5 miles. Basically, I was out in the middle of nowhere. Since I was alone, I was using a hammock that has a built-in bug net and I had a rain fly over it. I spent about 3 days halfway up a mountain just looking for a good place to hunt. I saw 3 to 4 good-sized bears, about 10 hogs, and came across some good-sized deer. On the 4th day, I was going to head down to a small stream that I had marked on my GPS, and then set up camp, restock on water, and prep for the 2-day hike back. I could have gone faster, but wanted to be able to look for any animal sign along the way. As I was approaching this small stream, I noticed a tent which I was excited to see, as I had been completely alone for a few days, and it's always nice to run into another hiker. Generally, us wilderness folks are pretty down to earth. As I got closer to the tent, I noticed that there was a small pack on the ground just outside of it. I figured the person couldn't have gone too far from where the camp was, so I set up my camp about 30 yards away, and with about 4 hours of daylight left, started cooking some dinner. 2 hours later, I was starting to wonder where this person was. Given that I was in the wilderness and it was a 1+ day hike out, there wasn't much I could do, but I did hike around the site to look for any signs of struggle, in case of a bear attack or maybe they had an injury. I got about 1/4 of a mile from the campsite, walking in a circle, but I didn't see anything. As night came, no one showed. I started a fire in hopes that the person would be able to find where they set up and have some light. The fires burn really bright in the dark forest and are very easy to see from far away. After eating, searching, and hoping that the person was going to make it back, I called it a night. I had a small flask with me and I took a couple sips of whiskey, jumped in my hammock with my pistol, and attempted to go to sleep. I sleep pretty hard, I mean really hard, regardless of where I am. It literally annoys my friends because I can always seem to fall asleep and stay asleep regardless of where in the world we are. But this night was different. I felt like something was off, but I figured it was just me worrying about this person who, by all my accounts, was completely missing. So for the first time in my life, I woke up to the sound of what I thought were footsteps, but not in the sense of footsteps on leaves, but what a heavy-footed person would make walking on an old wood floor. It was extremely loud. I got my gun and grabbed my headlamp, which was stored in a small compartment up above me, and waited to see if it would stop. Right at that moment, it did. Then I saw something that scared the shit out of me on my rainfly. The gleam of a flashlight, faint but there. I shouted hello, and right when I did, it sounded like 10 people suddenly running away from me in every direction. I dropped out of my hammock onto the ground, frantically turning on my headlamp, shining it all around me, but didn't see shit. My heart was racing pretty bad. I thought the flashlight might have been just the reflection of the moon on the rainfly. Yeah, that was it, and those footsteps running away from me were probably armadillos or something, even though their eyes shine and they are pretty easy to spot. Problem was, there was no moon. I'd never seen an armadillo above 2,000 feet, not to say that they don't live up here, I've just never seen one, and for some reason the campsite I set up by was gone. The fire had been put out by water. It was apparent because there was not a damn coal in the thing. I thought for sure it was 4 a.m., but I had only been asleep for about an hour. At this point I wanted to leave, but hiking out in the wilderness when it's dark is always a bad idea. So I grabbed my flask, took a swig of whiskey, removed my rainfly so I could see out of my hammock and around the area I was in, and tried my hardest to go back to sleep. I was laying down when I saw some light hit the trees above me. It was clear it was coming from downstream, and I got out of my hammock and started yelling, "Hey, y'all need any help?" No response. I saw whatever it was putting out the light, and it spun around and started heading downstream really fast. At this point, my body had pumped more adrenaline than it had blood, and I was exhausted from it all. I was finally able to fall asleep and woke up around 7 a.m. When I did, I noticed that my water filter I left out was missing. It's a gravity filter, and it hangs on a tree filtering water down to my main water bladder that I put in my backpack. The water bladder, sitting at the base of a tree, looked like it was cut down the middle with a knife. They had cut down my bear bag, which had food in it, and took some of the food. The creepiest part of it all was that they went through my bag, which was under my hammock, while I was sleeping. I checked the bear bag before I went back to sleep the second time, and it was still there, hanging. My bag under my hammock hadn't been touched. I packed all my shit and hightailed it out of there, keeping my pistol close to me and moving as fast as I could. I ended up making the hike back in just under 15 hours. I hiked part of the trail in the night, as I wasn't about to spend another night out there. I didn't see anyone on my hike out. There were no cars parked at the trailhead, and the DNR said they had only seen my car there. Since then, I haven't gone out there without any friends. I reported all this to the local DNR, but they looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I am. Tennessee has some real bumfucky people out in nature. I hiked all around while in school there, made some good memories with the girl in the enveloping nature. Tennessee has good roads to popular hiking sites and tons of mini trails branching off. Sometimes you need to know what to look for as far as trail markers go, because the interesting ones are always a good ways out. There's this one spring waterfall that spills across a mossy granite wall towering over a shallow stream that empties into a decent-sized pond. I went out there with a friend last time we got separated on the way out. I have no fucking clue how this happened, and we've each been hiking for over 10 years. I've run over it 1,000 times in my mind, and it has to be this one ledge system. To get to the top of the fall, you need to take a longish detour that has an old wooden railing and a 3-way branching ledge system. So I've taken all 3 routes and ended up at the same spot. They take maybe 3 to 4 minutes to blast through, and they're kind of like rocky corridors. I don't take the left one anymore, because I'm 90% sure that these big stains in the middle of it are blood. I don't want to know what happened there. It's odd because the left is by far the most inviting. Flowers bloom from vines that are etched into the moss-matted bedrock. Anyways, I'm 45 seconds ahead of her and opt for the right path when I realize I should tell her to avoid the left. It's really hard to reverse given the sloping angle of the path and the few short drops that become narrow climbs. Screw it, faster if I speed through and yell down. I get out of the right corridor and swing around to where the middle path drops off. I yell and no reply, so she took left. I ran over and climbed into the left corridor, thinking she saw the stains and freaked out. It looks like someone got bludgeoned to death, to be fair. She's not in the corridor. Ashley? Nothing. And that's what made my hair stand up. I literally heard nothing. No birds, no hum of the forest, not even wind. Just myself and the babbling water. I traced left all the way back and noted a few side passages if you miss a couple of the jumps. Nobody was in there or the middle though. Good. I figure I may as well get to the top of the falls where I can get somewhat of an aerial view. I get there and Ashley is sitting there waiting for me. She says she took the left path with the trail guide. What? There are no trail guides. They are rangers, but she knows the difference. They wouldn't be in the rock labyrinth. This guy had a uniform and a trail authority visor on. She knew what I was thinking based on my face and agreed that we should reverse course ASAP without saying anything out loud. Man, it's weird when you know you're being watched. So yeah, we pretend we are going back to the car real quick to get more water, and so I left some fish food in a little crevice like I always did and we left. She showed me this weird side passage that could not have existed a year before. I walked all the way around. You had to crouch, but you could walk through the labyrinth if you kept left through. Hindsight, we should have taken another way. I think he lives in those tunnels. Ashley said he kept trying to lead her in different directions, but she just followed the light and saw him standing in the tunnel as she walked the rest of the trip to the top. That means he was in there when I was looking for her. That means she followed him before seeing the blood splatters all over the floors and walls. And that's not the totally fucked up part. The fucking fish food I left in the crevice was on the hood of my car. Her water bottle was gone too. She had it attached via a carabiner to her backpack, so he must have snuck up and taken it at some point. We had been hiking fast too. Never went back and will not. I am a female and I live in England. I was about 13 years old at the time this happened. My mom and I had a huge fight, as we usually did when I was young, and she kicked me out of the house. Having no phone to contact friends and it being past 11 at night, I did what I had to do and went to the woods to find cover from the rain, right next to my secondary school. I found a nice dry patch of thick grass under a big tree and tried to grab some sleep before I ventured to my friend's house the next morning. I had been smart enough to bring a throw blanket with me, which helped protect me from the cold November chill. I can sleep almost anywhere, anytime. It's a talent of mine. I awoke rudely and suddenly. The woods around me were dark and it was freezing cold, still raining. I checked my watch. It was around 2:30 a.m. and I settled back down to try to go back to sleep when I heard a shriek. Not a human shriek, but an animalistic shriek that terrified me and shook me to my core. Jumping up from my makeshift bed, I gathered my backpack and stuffed my blanket in there, keeping my eyes peeled. I was quite deep in the woods and it was hard to see. Squinting my eyes, I almost jumped as I heard the shriek again. It was closer now, uncomfortably close. I swung my backpack over my shoulder and quickly moved. I kept looking around, but it was almost useless. I could see the shadows of the branches dancing on the forest floor as the moonlight just breached the canopy above. I moved as quickly as I could, trying to avoid any sticks in the undergrowth. I heard the shriek again from somewhere close behind me. Looking around, I scanned the area quickly, looking for the source of the horrific sound and a place to find cover. There were a few bushes to the left of me, which I quickly hid behind. I could hear fast approaching footsteps, but whatever was behind me was not on 2 feet. It sounded like it was on all fours. My eyes had begun to adjust properly to the darkness, so I took a chance and looked. Peeking out of the top of the bush, my eyes widened with horror as they clapped on some grotesque creature. It was humanoid in shape from what I could see, impossibly skinny with long arms and legs, with dark patches of thin hair dotted around its body, and I could see the profile of its face. Its eyes were large and black, its nose was like a dog's, tilted upwards and sniffing the air. Its mouth opened, and I could just about make out rows of pointed, needle-like teeth. I suppressed a scream, frozen in fear. It was still sniffing the air, moving its head slightly from left to right, looking for me. I adjusted my footing and trod straight onto a stick. It snapped, the sound echoing through the air. The creature's head snapped to my hiding place, and our eyes met. Another shriek, and I jumped up and ran in the opposite direction. I ran, and I could hear whatever that thing was hammering on the undergrowth behind me. I let out a scream to anyone that could hear me, praying silently as I stumbled and cried and thrashed through the brush. "Help me," I yelled, but the sound came out strangled. Hot tears streamed down my face as I could hear the creature gaining on me. If it was going to be the end of me, then I wasn't going to give up without a chase. Suddenly, I heard a voice I never thought I'd hear again. My mother's, shouting my name. "Mom, I'm here," I shouted, my voice clear now. "Help me." I could now see the exit of the woods, and I nearly fainted in relief. I could see flashlights and hear the voices of men and women, all calling my name. As I neared the exit, I chanced to look behind me. I couldn't see or hear the creature anymore, but I didn't slow my pace. In fact, I sped up, knowing safety was in sight. Pushing with all my might, I could feel my legs and chest beginning to burn with exertion. As I cleared the last few trees, I heard the shriek again, further away now. I thanked God or whatever merciful force had assisted me that night. I saw my mom at the mouth of the woods, and I hurled straight into her arms, screaming and crying. I didn't even look at the police around me, I just clutched my mother close as I sobbed. I awoke later that morning in the hospital. A policeman questioned me, asking me how my clothes were torn up, and why my face and hands were covered in deep scratches. I guess I had done it while tearing through the branches. I told him the entire story, my eyes filling with tears as I recounted the encounter with the beast. He looked bemused, asking if I'd had a bad dream. He didn't believe me, nor did my mom. She had gone around all my friends' houses asking if I was there, and when she couldn't find me, she had called the police and they searched the woods first. Regardless of whether they believed me or not, if they had went somewhere else before the woods, I doubt I'd be here now. I'm now 23 and I'm still haunted by nightmares of the creature. I'm not sure what it was that chased me that night, and nothing I've researched matches the description, despite endless searching. I obsessed over this creature for months, to the point I could think of little else. I try and put it behind me now, but sometimes I can hear that shriek in my dreams.